You're watching Breakthrough News.
I'm Charlotte Hohenstein and you're watching Breakthrough News on BTR today. On today's show, we're talking about college dating and whether the millennial penchant for avoiding commitment is a bad thing. Here to discuss is Charlotte Liebman, author of a recent article on the subject in Cosmopolitan magazine, and Dane Feldman, host of the BTR dating and relationship show, The Hash. So there's been a lot of buzz over the last few years about hookup culture and a variety of perspectives, from supporters who say that it represents liberation, especially for women, to detractors who worry about the emotional backlashes. And college, of course, is a very specific time for many people for experimentation, growth, and just having fun. Charlotte, your piece in Cosmo describes college dating as dysfunctional. Can you elaborate briefly on why?
Well, I think that basically we're living in an incredible time for liberation of lots of groups that have been subjugated in the past, including women. And given that my article was sort of addressing, heterosexual relationships because it was cosmopolitan and wasn't really trying to address that much other than that, I will speak mostly on that subject. But yeah, I think that within college culture, I'll speak about Harvard specifically, I would say most of the people I knew said they identified as feminists. Women were kind of doing all the stuff men were doing. There, obviously, people in the sciences would have other things to say about that. But, women are tremendously empowered intellectually, politically, etc. And so I think that what's happening is there's a desire on the part of women to assert themselves as equal to men, which is a good thing. But what is being ignored is sort of the underlying paradigms that describe gendered behavior, I think. So for instance, men are stereotypically thought to not be as emotional. And so what's happening is, let's say, a woman who wants to assert herself as equal to a man will not, own particular parts of herself, say, that maybe are more emotional, whether or not it's because she's a woman, and will sort of, she'll attempt to enact those stereotypically masculine behaviors of empowerment, such as being emotionally stoic. And I think that what's happening is that the empowerment of women is leading itself to a cultural perpetuation of kind of stereotypically masculine behaviors. And really the issue is how we can dismantle those paradigms.
Dane, okay, so you went to University of Massachusetts. Did you see this sort of phenomenon of women basically trying to adopt male behavior as part of becoming more empowered in all aspects of their life? Do you feel like you saw that?
In part, but I got very lucky in the sense that University of Massachusetts is located in Western Massachusetts, which is actually in many ways sort of a pioneer when it comes to gender equality and LGBT rights. Western Massachusetts is known as being a hub for those kinds of things, and it's really a place where people are comfortable being themselves. There's even a Stonewall Center that's obviously supposed to be like a branch of Stonewall here, and you still see it. There are still people that aren't familiar with the fact that gender boundaries are changing. There's still students that are coming from Eastern Massachusetts and students that are coming from New Jersey, New York, anywhere else in the country. But for the most part, I think there's a different kind of understanding in that part of our country. Massachusetts as a whole is known for being sort of the trendsetter in LGBT rights and gender rights. I would say the majority of the people I came in contact with were huge Elizabeth Warren fans before she really made her strides. So it's very hard to say at a campus like that, even though it's a public university, it's a very different public university from most in this country.
But I think what Charlotte was saying wasn't actually necessarily in opposition to what you're describing.
Right.
it's more that, and the way that you put it, Charlotte, in your article was that because of this male sort of competitive, well, not necessarily competitive, but male behavior on the part of women trying to, being liberated and taking control in relationships, that what you do is set up this power play between people who couldn't care, who can care less, and it becomes this weird attempt to not care so as not to get hurt or not to sort of lose this power game in a relationship, which then stunts any sort of real connection from happening, right? Or at least that's how I understood your article. And I'm wondering whether, Dane, you see this sort of fear of looking like you actually care too much about someone when you're perhaps like interested in dating them, whether you saw that, Dane, as well on campus.
That I absolutely saw. Yeah, I mean, you're right in saying that it doesn't matter how forward-thinking a campus may be, that's still an issue. And I guess it does focus on the fact that, men are supposed to be the ones who don't care, and so women then find a way to sort of follow along, follow suit, and then they play the game of, well, I don't care. And I definitely did see a lot of that and it doesn't matter who it's coming from. It sort of came from everybody, I think. And that's, I guess, the problem with college hookup culture is most people go through that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, because there's a really interesting statistic, right? And I'm pretty sure, Charlotte, you mentioned this in your article, and this was from NYU sociologist Paula England, who did a study and found that 61% of guys and 68% of girls actually wanted more from whatever casual hookups they were having, but presumably were just too afraid to actually admit that. And so you sort of end up with both sides being unsatisfied with this equation. Is that what you saw happening, Charlotte?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is just about emotional maturity, or I don't know. I mean, I didn't get into this in depth, but because of the work that I'm doing for this foundation, that's research basically about millennials' relationship to career aspirations, there's actually a strange set of overlaps between kind of the research I've done for that line of thought and also the research for the Cosmo article. And a lot of what I've thought about with regard to kind of millennials in relation to their career aspirations is the way in which being so-called digital natives has affected the way in which kind of millennials construe the idea of commitment and kind of being on a track. And I think that growing up with like AIM, and I mean, obviously this is totally limited to like a privileged, sector of society that had access to the internet at a certain age. And as I said, I like have the limitation of talking about Harvard, which couldn't be more elite of an institution. So, I'm not trying to say that I'm talking about every millennial aged person ever, but I think that, I don't know, I mean, this girl who read my article wanted to talk to me on the phone the other day because she was having boy trouble. She just wrote me an email, and so I said I would talk to her. So we were talking on the phone, and she was asking me why she thinks I think people care less, or why people are so reluctant to commit. And, on some level, I think it's just this like impatience and desire to explore that I think our generation experiences in part because of our relationship to the web. So for instance, like I want something, I go on Amazon.com and it tells me I have 5 days rather than 2 days to wait for it, and I get pissed off because I want it to come in 2 days rather than 5 days. And it's like there's this kind of fast pace that I think is really unique to our generation. And in the realm of the career conversation, there's a statistic, I think that's almost 90% of millennials believe that they won't work for fewer than 4 employers within the next 3 years or something, which is really, really radically different than generations past. You talk to, even my situation is, my career, right now currently I work for 5 different people, and I just got out of college in May. And I think it's this idea of wanting to put yourself out there in all of these different contexts is a kind of a byproduct of this sort of frenetic energy that we can enact on the web, and I think that we're enacting it in the realm of relationships, and it's cool, but it also, there should be a level of self-awareness, I think, that accompanies that change in the culture that's not necessarily happening. So on the one hand, we have that change. People want to see other people. People want a more fluid relationship to sexuality, to monogamy, etc. But the thing that's not keeping up with that is our understanding of, gender paradigms. I think that, we shouldn't think that not expressing yourself is cool, because it's not, and no one understands what you're feeling if you do that.
Mm. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back in a moment after a brief excerpt from this week's episode of Serious Business featuring Slonk Donkerson.
If you're staying for a drink anyway, why not wait till the blistering sun has faded and take a second to imagine a scene where that costume dream and old casino gleams across the water far away. Whatever say, love is a riot.
We're back with our discussion on college dating. What about the goal? What about this idea that maybe we are creating this ideal of romance that never actually existed? Because I feel like a lot of this conversation often feels quite pessimistic, that we're sort of losing our way and losing a sense of our emotions. And I wonder whether that, from that perspective, people are assuming that there was some, golden age where relationships were always totally authentic and connected, and in reality, this, there's always been barriers, and there's always been difficulties and mess when it comes to dating, and we're just negotiating new norms. What do you think about that, Dane?
Well, as far as I know, and I hate to be presumptuous in this way, but as far as I know, college has always been the cesspool for just trying things and, for lack of a better word, being completely anti-romantic. I mean, that's where you're going to find your hookup culture, no matter what the generation is. You know what I mean? And the question of hookup culture is really, in that sense, that's generational as far as what it really means. How far along the line that really goes. Obviously 100 years ago, it's not all college students having sex with each other premaritally, but I think that it's still, that's where you're going to find the ideals of romanticism without people actually being terribly romantic. But the idea of romanticism, I feel like that's so, I don't know, it's hard to say, because it's definitely evolving, and I think because of what Charlotte was talking about earlier with technology, I think you'll find people saying, whenever someone talks about a relationship and the fact that they're in a relationship and they met somebody in a Starbucks or on the street, it's like, our generation just finds that so insane. You mean you really met someone at a Starbucks,
Right.
And that's, I think, it's a new ideal. It's a new ideal.
Charlotte, so on one level, the new technology does seem to be a bit of a buffer for more substantial communication, even if it's putting us constantly in connection with more and more people. But do you also think that it's inevitable that we're going to have to deal with creating new norms for this kind of way in interacting? And maybe it seems stupid to talk about, whether or not I put 3 exclamation marks instead of 1 exclamation mark, or any exclamation marks, etc., etc. But maybe, we are in the process of actually creating new codes, and that these are actually genuinely significant for navigating these new relationships, rather than sort of belittling it and saying that it's, it's kind of stupid or insubstantial,
I think that's completely right. I think, in the first season of Girls, Lena Dunham totally satirized, I think the second season, the first episode of the second season of Girls, Lena Dunham totally satirizes that when the scene basically is Ray confronts Shoshana in some room at a party and says, how was I supposed to know what you were saying to me when you sent me like a gun followed by a frog followed by a hamburger or something. There's an emoji joke. But it's really true. I mean, people send emoji and like these like intricate jokes, and it's totally like something that's in the zeitgeist and is something to think about critically. But I think, it can't be the only thing we think about, and it has to go kind of in tandem with a generational, journey of self-inquiry to establish kind of how communication can be rebuilt with a little bit more integrity, I think.
Absolutely. Dane, I think this is going to be the last question because then we're going to have to wrap up. What about the guy's perspective? Because I do feel like these types of conversations always inevitably slide into this theme of, is the girl happy? Are women somehow getting hurt as we negotiate these new norms? And I'm wondering what you think, whether or not that it's appropriate to focus on the female perspective because maybe they are the more vulnerable ones in the equation right now, or whether you think that actually there are a lot of guys out there who are completely confused about dating and sometimes feel confused and vulnerable and just get completely left out of this discussion.
Well, to be completely frank, for one, anyone who listens to the hash knows that, I personally am kind of taken out of it because I've been in a relationship for a long time, but when I speak to any of my guy friends who are single and struggling or, looking for a relationship, the bottom line is, whether or not it's true, the men of our generation believe that the women have all the power.
Really?
And to them, it's unbelievably troubling for them. And you'll find, I found the more I speak to my male friends, they're wondering the same things. Should I text her back? Should I wait 20 minutes? She didn't text me back. It's been a day. What do I do? Should I ask her out or should I wait for her to ask me out? It's a lot of the same questions that are swirling around, and it's a similar problem of, do I seem like I care too much? Is that not masculine? I care too much, right? I should tone it back. And I think most people are really surprised to hear that, especially, women are really surprised to hear that men feel that way, and men are always surprised to hear that women still think that the ball is not in their park. And it's a communication issue, but how best can we really find a way to get everybody on the same page better than they are,
Well, that was surprising to me. But that's all the time we have for now. Thank you very much, Charlotte and Dane, for joining me today. To continue the conversation, share your thoughts with us on Twitter @Breakthrough News. We'll be right back in a moment after this quick excerpt from the latest episode of Live Studio featuring Yellow Red Sparks.
There's a chance we could meet under the likeness of summer. There's a chance we could fall under the highlight of winter. And there's a parts car.
Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm Charlotte Hohenstein and this is Breakthrough News, an independent news show for the free thinking web. We bring you a range of voices on the issues that today's generation is thinking about. Be sure to check out breakthroughradio.com through the weekend for our continued Blue Week coverage, including a look inside the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Blue Ribbon campaign. That's it for what's breaking through the news today. Tell us what's breaking through your world on Twitter @Breakthrough News. I'm Charlotte Hohenstein and thank you for joining us.